2, 1, 0. All engines running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Big shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drifting to the right a little. 20. Down a half. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
What you just witnessed was Neil Armstrong taking off from Houston, Texas, and landing on this space rock called the Moon. This event took place in 1969 and on a spaceship called Apollo 11. This was a historic event for the United States because this was the first time a man had stepped foot on the moon. You may have heard the famous quote that Neil Armstrong said when he first landed on the moon. Let me play it for you.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Now, what Armstrong meant about this quote is that his small step was such a historic one for the United States and the world itself, because this event would now sculpt the entire future and what was to come. But Neil Armstrong was not the only one to land on the moon in 1969. He had a partner named Buzz Aldrin, and these two men were the first people to step foot on the moon and make United States history. But the thing is, they didn't do it by themselves. They had help. But who were these people that helped? As you can see in the picture, you see Neil Armstrong, you see Buzz Aldrin, but who is the other person? Well, this person was Michael Collins. And Michael Collins was also part of the Apollo 11 trip in 1969. No, Michael Collins actually was not part of the landing of the moon, but he was part of the mission. He stayed behind to be the safe guy, to be the guy that would actually return if something fatal were to happen, and he would live to tell the story. But it's honestly safe to say that these three men made United States history and made world history as being the first explorers of the moon. But what was the reason to land and to get someone on the moon? Well, on May 25th, 1961, John F. Kennedy announced a dramatic and ambitious goal for the Congress. He proposed to get an American safely on the moon by the end of the decade and return him home safely. Now, Kennedy felt great pressure in this decision because the Soviet Union had overtaken and caught up to the United States. They actually felt as if they were behind. Now, they as in the United States. The United States felt as if they were falling behind in the space race, and they felt as if getting on the moon would be the greatest accomplishment in space history. Now let's take a look at what John F. Kennedy actually said on May 25th.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
Now what John Kennedy was just about to announce is the Apollo program.
I believe we possess all the resources and talents necessary, but the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish. In conclusion, let me emphasize one point. It is not a pleasure for any President of the United States, as I'm sure it was not a pleasure for my predecessor, to come before the Congress and ask for new appropriations which place burdens on our people. I came to this conclusion with some reluctance. But in my judgment, this is a most serious time in the life of our country and in the life of freedom around the globe. And it is the obligation, I believe, of the President of the United States to at least make his recommendations to the members of the Congress so that they can reach their own conclusions with that judgment before them. You must decide yourselves as I have decided. And I am confident that whether you finally decide in the way that I have decided or not, that your judgment, as my judgment, is reached on what is in the best interest of our country.
Now you have to remember that all these events transpired during the Cold War in the 60s, and President John F. Kennedy did have in mind that if he were to beat the Soviet Union to the moon, that would have a huge jump on the United States. So the Apollo programs were launched. Now the Apollo programs were not successful at first. It actually took a whopping 8 tries for them to actually get some progress on this program. And then the Apollo 8 came, and that was really good. So the Apollo 8 was launched on December 21st, 1968. It was an orbit around the moon and returned to Earth on December 27th, 1968. This was very historic. And then we have the Apollo 10. The Apollo 10 launched on May 18th, 1969. This was a lunar orbit and returned to Earth on May 26th, 1969. Then we have the Apollo 11. The Apollo 11 was during the Sea of Tranquility. This actually got into the Sea of Tranquility. This launched on July 16th, 1969, landed on the moon on July 20th, 1969, and returned to Earth on July 24th, 1969. Now, Apollo 12 was launched November 14th, 1969, landed on the moon November 19th, 1969, and returned to Earth on November 24th, 1969. Then Apollo 13 was launched April 11th, 1970. This was a lunar flyby and return. Manufacturers actually stopped lunar landing, so it returned to Earth on April 17th, 1970. Apollo 14 was launched on January 31st, 1971. This landed on the moon February 5th, 1971, and returned to Earth February 9th, 1971. Now, Apollo 15 was launched July 26th, 1927. It landed on the moon on July 30th, 1971, and returned to Earth on August 7th, 1971. This was one of the longest times a person had been on the moon. Then came Apollo 16. Apollo 16 was another moon landing on April 20th, 1972. It returned back to Earth on April 27th, 1972. And you could say that this was coming to the end of moon exploration as to be. Finally, you have Apollo 17. This was the last of the Apollo program. It launched on December 7th, 1972, landed on the moon on December 11th, 1972, and returned to Earth on December 19th, 1972. Thank you for watching, and please remember that moon exploration has impacted the United States tremendously. Solar panels, technology, everything. It has impacted us so much, and you would never know.